boy, there's a lot going on in the world. You've got, kind of a meltdown going on right now in Turkey. There are protests in the streets in Brazil. The stock market has been on a roller coaster ever since Bernanke said, maybe we're going to take away the heroin. And or maybe that's not the correct characterization of it. So let's turn to one of the smartest people I know, certainly one of the finest economists I think in the world, Dr. Richard Wolff, professor of economics emeritus at the University of Massachusetts and Amherst, author of numerous books, including Democracy at Work and democracyatwork.info, and of course his website rdwolf with 2fs.com. Dr. Wolff, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Great to have you with us. Let's start with the economy, if you don't mind, and the stock market and the Fed and all this stuff. If it's true that 30 to 40% of our GDP or our economy is now financialized, is now financial products, and that those have some kind of close tie to the Fed, isn't that like a sign that our economy has been hollowed out? And I mean, shouldn't we take any wobbling of things as a consequence of anything the Fed does as a problem? FDR didn't rely on the Fed. He went to Congress and said, give me money, I'll hire people. They gave him money, he hired people.
Well, the interesting thing is that so many negatives besiege the American economy today. So many pressures to keep this crisis going, the one that started in late 2007 and here 5.5 years later is still with us, that the Fed has been in the peculiar position of being one of the very few parts of the apparatus of government that has actually tried to sustain the economy, to push forward against all of the backward problems, whether that be the continuing high unemployment, the continuing foreclosure of homes, the terrible economic crisis in Europe that is, after all, our largest trading partner, the slowing of growth in China, I could go on, that we have come to rely in a very dangerous way on what the Fed has been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. And basically what the Fed has been doing is pouring money into the economy. And I mean pouring. Huge, unprecedented, historical creation of money, pouring it into the economy, pressing down interest rates to near zero, trying to get people and businesses to borrow more money, to have more money in their pocket. Now, it hasn't worked in the sense it hasn't stopped the crisis, but it has so much money sloshing around in the hands of banks, insurance companies, and rich people that they have been on a speculative boom. They've boosted the stock market. There were people who mistakenly thought a booming stock market could offset or counteract a vast mass of the population in economic trouble. They now see that that's wrong. But in the end, the Fed was, by pumping up the money, keeping the thing from a massive meltdown. And so when Bernanke last week in his press conference suggested that they might, and to use the language that has become popular now, taper down the flood of money creation, it freaked out the people at the top who know very well that the stock prices of the stock market and their profits are more dependent on the Fed and its easy money policy, or if you like, its quantitative easing policy, than at any time in our history. So they panicked last Thursday, and you could see the results, and no one knows where that's going now.
Yeah. And I've just figured they're just going to keep, blowing up the bubble until at least the 2016 elections. I mean, it seemed like in 2008 that they were, the Bush thought he could just keep blowing this thing up until 2008, and he mistimed that. But
yeah, I think that's a very important point. There's a temptation, both on the part of the mass media and on the part of these governmental officials, to put forward a face, we have it under control, we're managing it, we know what we're doing and what the effect of our efforts will be. And the public should understand that that is simply not true. This Federal Reserve and the government of George Bush at the time did not understand we were heading into this crisis. I will remind you that the leaders of these institutions then told us that we didn't need to worry about that anymore. We'd learned the lessons of the Great Depression. Right. That's clearly false. Then they told us it would be short, a kind of a subprime mortgage event that wouldn't be a big problem. That was wrong. Then they told us it wouldn't last really into the many years. That's already wrong. So keep in mind that when they tell you that building these bubbles is something they have under control, or that the vast amount of money that they've poured in will not end up boosting prices and giving us an inflation of the sort we've never seen in this country, that these are just people wishing that these things were true, but they don't have it under control today any more than they did before this crisis hit and while this crisis has been continuing.
Yeah. In the 3 minutes we have left, I'm curious your thoughts on Turkey, Brazil, and the Chinese economy, if it's possible to squeeze them into that.
Yes, I think they are all connected in the following way. In Turkey, you have an accumulation of grievances of people over a whole host of issues, whether it's the government mowing down city parks for malls and mosques, or whether it is the repression of their labor movement, which is an old problem, or whether it is the global crisis, which is now, after a few years of hiatus, hitting the Turkish economy. And then the same can be said for Brazil. You're basically seeing people who haven't stood up, beginning to realize, whether they look at Occupy Wall Street, which they know about, or they look at the Arab Spring, or they look at the Europeans that are in the streets for general strikes every third week, that they better get moving and acting, because otherwise they're in for a long, difficult downturn. And I think that's what's happened in Brazil. I think it's what's happened in Turkey. China is a little bit different. China is at the end of a long period of boosting their central bank with lots of money flowing into the economy and so on. And so they're discovering that they can't continue to be the global leader of economic development if the rest of the world is in deep trouble. And so they're being hampered by the fact that the Europeans can't buy those Chinese goods the way they used to. Americans the same. The Chinese economy is slowing. When they slow, it impacts back on Europe and the United States. And once again, we're forced to understand that we have a world system, a capitalist system, whose parts depend on each other, and so much of it is not working well that none of us is safe so long as this system goes on unquestioned, unchallenged, and unchanged.
Do you think that's why the Chinese are moving people off rural land and into cities, or even building cities for them, and why the Russians just announced a massive multi-billion-dollar program to build infrastructure?
Yeah, I think they're desperate, and I think that the idea is that they're having massive movements of people from the countryside, which is not viable for them anymore, into the cities, and they're terrified of the social problem. What do you do with masses of people moving to the cities in hopes of a better life when you don't have the jobs for them to have that better life? You better create them somehow, or else you're going to have an unmanageable social explosion. And there again, Turkey and Brazil give them a very clear idea of where they may be heading if they don't come up with a solution. But it's not clear that they can, by themselves, do it. And that's the rub of a system that isn't working, that even the parts that can escape for a while discover sooner or later that they live on this planet and depend on it.
Remarkable. So well said. Dr. Richard Wolff, RD Wolff with 2 Fs, WOLFF.com, the website. Dr. Wolff, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tom, for the opportunity.
It is always an honor and pleasure to have you on our program. We will be back 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And you can get information on Dr. Wolff's book at democracyatwork.info, INFO. 15 minutes past the hour.